So this takes place in a dark future, about 100 years in the future, in which monsters have overrun the Earth and those with magic oppress those without. So Flynn is born without magic, and because of this, he's treated like a second-class citizen, and he's not very happy about this. So he winds up joining a rebellion where he meets Aurelia, the Fire Dragon's son, who was a champion monster fighter before she also ran away to join the rebellion. So it's a little bit dark fantasy, a little bit dystopia. Very perceptive. Luke was part of the inspiration for the character of Flynn. Like Luke, he's an ordinary, young boy, doesn't really have a lot of prospects, but has big dreams, and that's part of why he's always, idealized the rebellion. He likes the idea of, getting to stand up for something, for a change, instead of always just being trampled on. But his and Luke's fates wind up being quite different. So Nightingale is actually a standalone short story. It's part of a fairy tale retelling anthology that's coming out from Snowy Wings Publishing later this spring. And so The Nightingale is a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. It's part of his collected works. And so I'm doing a sci-fi retelling that takes place in a sort of Star Wars-y universe with a space empress. So Brave New Girls came about because, so Paige and I, we are, writer buddies, and one day we were just complaining about how few women in STEM there are in both real life and in science fiction, and usually when they are in science fiction, they're never the main character, they're always some sort of sidekick or love interest, and we were like, why can't these girls be the main character for a change? So we were like, well, let's put together an anthology that stars these girls to both fill that gap and hopefully inspire some real life girls to check out science and tech and engineering. And so we put out an open call for submissions to get the stories. That's how we found you.
Yes, that's how you found me.
There really is no reason why there should be fewer women than men in the sciences. There really just is no reason for it other than cultural pressures and such. So I hope that by depicting these girls as heroines, as main characters, that girls will start to see themselves in it and see that they can both be the heroine and the engineer. I hope that they will basically be respected as much as male writers are. I think there is still a tendency to devalue women's work, which is unfortunate. I have seen some change, though, which is good. It's going to take a while for that change to really take hold. Right now, it's still considered radical, and I want it to be normal. The fact that I'm a female sci-fi writer should not be any big whoop. It just be oh, okay, why not?
Why not?
A lot of places. I mean, music is definitely a big influence for me because I've been a musician all my life. I started playing violin when I was 3. And then, I don't know, I read a lot, I watch a lot of, sci-fi and fantasy, and so, sometimes I'll just, get an idea. I'm not entirely sure where it came from, but I know it didn't occur in a vacuum. Yeah, so this was one of those things that it was a mishmash of ideas. It kind of combines my favorite things, which is sci-fi, especially sci-fi set in space, and of course, music. So I had this idea first for doing a story about an orchestra player, because you see a lot of performing arts books that mostly focus on singers and dancers, but not so much on the instrumentalists. So I wanted an instrumentalist as a main character, and me being me, I had to set it in a space-age future. She was another one which was a mishmash. And again, it started out with an idea about the character. I had this idea about, this girl who had just graduated college and has kind of a humdrum life. And then one day, what if, something terrible happened to someone she loves? What would she do? And of course, me being me, I had to set it in space. Yeah.
Well, there are worse places to set it, yeah.
So in the Jane books, I really explored some of the philosophical aspects of artificial intelligence, just because that's a subject that's always fascinated me. Like, what makes you human? What would happen if you had an AI who thought like a human and was conscious? Like, would they be treated as a human? So that's something I've explored. And then in Starswept, I explored sort of like the exploitation of artists, like how you have these people who are doing what they love, and for that reason, it's easy for people to take advantage of them. I've learned that there are certain aspects that tend to pop up in my stories, whether I mean to or not. Like, every story always has a strong heroine in it, even if she's not the main character, as in the case of Edge of Evil, where Flynn is the main character, but Aurelia, the heroine, is a very big presence. I've also noticed that my characters tend to have very strong familial relationships, even when they're an orphan or something. Like, they're always wondering about that parent they never met, etc. And I think that probably comes from the fact that I have pretty close ties with my own family. I would love to. Those are two of my favorite characters ever, so good examples. I think most of the reason why my characters are young is because I'm still pretty young, not old yet. And so when I wrote Artificial Absolutes, Jane is 22, I was 23, and I mostly wrote her at that age because that's the age I could relate to. And it's still the case where it's I can relate to younger characters because I've been there. Whereas with older characters, I would love to explore them, but I feel like I'm not ready yet. So talk to me again in a decade.
We'll definitely be here then.
So when I joined Red Adept, I had no idea how any of this publishing stuff worked. I'm like, I write words and somebody turns them into a book. But in working with Red Adept, which actually started out as an indie editing company and is still pretty connected to the indie author world, I sort of learned behind the scenes how a book gets made, and I was like, all right, I could do that. And so then I started sort of craving that kind of creative control. And so Crazy 8 Press, we're a collective of independent authors. We all have control over our own works, which is nice because we get to pick the covers, we get to pick our editors, etc.
So do you think you might yourself branch out and start your own publishing thing? I mean, you've already done Brave New Girls, but do you think, one day, okay, you're going to be Mary Fan publisher in addition to Mary Fan author?
I mean, I would love to do that someday. It's mostly a feasibility matter. I mean, I still have big ideas about turning Brave New Girls, instead of just being a series of anthologies, into a whole small press. But we'll see if I can pull it off. Well, it's fun hanging out with these guys, when they're not trying to kill each other. Actually, that's part of the fun. Just kidding. So yeah, it's mostly for the community aspect because, even as an independent author, it's still nice to know that someone has your back.
Mary Fan, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
And it was great talking with you.